So moving straight to our fireside chat, uniting Africa's markets, building a people-centered economy through the AfCFTA. I hope you all know the AfCFTA. Today we're going to learn more about it and then really see how we can use that to unite not just the African markets, but also between Africa and its diaspora. To do that and to help me moderate that, I will invite my brother Samuel Dubik Mahama, the former CEO of the Ghana Electricity Company of Ghana, an entrepreneur, somebody well vexed in business in Africa. So Sammy, please join me and take it from there. I told you yesterday, you said you were going to jump from...
Oh, no,
he jumped.
So he's done it for us.
For those of you who want to travel, we also have these Ghana passports out there, so you can just pick a copy on your way out and then move. So, Sammy, take it over.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Well, for this fireside chat, we are actually honored to have, I call him a young man, and he calls me an old man. The gentleman who's going to sit here to have a chat with me has had the privilege of being part of the whole conversation of the Africa Free Trade. He's going to be able to give us some insights of some of the things that have been done that even from yesterday's investment conversation, we realized that we don't even know. And that has been the problem of what? Africa. We have done so much, but we are not able to tell our story. I don't know what we are waiting for or what is holding us back to the extent that everybody still thinks that we are still where we were 25, 30 years ago. I'd like to invite onto the stage my very good young friend. I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to make a mistake. I remember when they mentioned his name or they wrote his name on the what do you call it, the flyers. He sent me a message and said, they've made a mistake with my name. So I said, oh, we will correct it at the program. But at the program, I would make sure that I don't mention your name, so you would actually have to introduce yourself very well. And then tell everybody what you used to do, what you are doing, and then we'll get the conversation rolling. Thank you. Here you go.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nana Bediatuo Asante. I was the secretary to the president of the Republic of Ghana, the chef de cabinet, when President Akufo-Addo was president of Ghana. I'm now unemployed.
And impacted knowledge, I guess.
I'm looking for a job. And yeah, I mean, that's my story. I'm a lawyer by profession.
Well, thank you, Nana, for joining us. Africa Free Trade. Okay, let's not even use the abbreviations or the whole trade in Africa. You've had the opportunity of sitting with the president day in, day out, know what the president thinks, having the opportunity of meeting other presidents in Africa, attending ECOWAS meetings, AU meetings. What are your thoughts?
Thank you. About African trade?
African trade.
Well, I mean, African trade, as you know, I mean, has been going on for centuries. And in fact, it's kind of ironic that in 2025, we're talking about African integration, particularly with respect to trade and commerce, because that was going on, you know, in the 12th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th centuries. This was going on in Africa. There's a wonderful book called A Fistful of Shells, which talks about the trade in West Africa from about 1400 to the present. And you actually see that we've regressed. With the creation of the nation states after the Berlin Conference, we now put up barriers between each other. I mean, and we're having to disentangle it with schemes like the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. What is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement? Well, it's a project to create the single largest market in the world. You know, the North American Free Trade Agreement has Canada, the United States, and Latin America, Central and South America. And the EU, obviously, 27 states in Europe. But Africa's will be the largest population, the most resourced, and ironically also, which is a good thing, the youngest population. The largest single market in the world. And yet, we trade less among ourselves than Europe does or North America does. While we are languishing somewhere around 13%, Europe is trading among itself, among themselves at about 73%. So you can see that we have quite some catching up to do. But I think the first thing is to ensure that the AfCFTA itself has been fully incorporated by all the African countries. I think as we speak now, I think all of them have ratified it. All the 54 countries have ratified it. And as you know, the African Union has declared the Caribbean the 6th region of Africa. So the Caribbean is no longer simply part of the diaspora, it's actually part of Africa. And institutions like the African Import-Export Bank.
Not to cut you. You know what you just said right now about the Caribbean being added? This is the first time I'm hearing it. Yes. That's what I've been trying to say. All these beautiful things happen without Africa itself being told what has happened to Africa. You understand? So we are at a point where my major difficulty with grasping with the beauties of what has been achieved over the years is it gets difficult by the second, because even yesterday, not to cut your presentation, even yesterday you made a point about, he asked a question yesterday about the single payment platform that could help with the trade. But have you realized that if you hadn't explained that I could actually buy something in Nigeria and pay for it in cedis, I wouldn't have known that the platform was up and running. I would have still thought that it was still a concept.
Yeah. I think things are happening, and that's a major part of my presentation is education. But I'll get there. So we have a major African institution like the African Import-Export Bank, which African Bank is what they call it. Everybody knows that as the African Bank, has actually started operations in the Caribbean. So CARICOM nations are able to access the African Bank facilities and programs. We had in last year the 31st anniversary of the African Bank was held in the Bahamas, where all the Caribbean leaders were in attendance, and it was a beautiful thing. What we're seeking to do now is to make sure there's at least a direct link between West Africa and the Caribbean by air. And I don't know if yesterday Dental spoke about it here, but she's having a program in Barbados, and Barbados is the closest island to Africa. And I think she's going to start doing some charter flights and so on. Because right now, if I want to go to Bahamas or want to go to Jamaica or Barbados, I'll go to the United States, probably to Florida, and then catch a flight from there. We're talking about 24 hours. It took me forever to get there. When you can literally take 5 hours to get to Barbados, and then maybe have a catch a flight in Barbados that can take you anywhere in the Caribbean. So, accessing markets, creating access to markets is a key function of the AfCFTA. But I think really what we ought to be doing is starting at the basic level. If you consider something like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, every country was supposed to incorporate it into their domestic policy. So the ministries for housing, for health, for education, for various sectors would incorporate the Sustainable Development Goals. So the departments and agencies would be on the ground and involve the ordinary man on the street, as they say, who would then be aware of the Sustainable Development Goals and what the UN is trying to do. I believe that's the same approach we should take with the AfCFTA. Because now we have, like, market women in Ghana. They get on trucks. They go to Nigeria. They go to Burkina Faso. They go to Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, to trade. They get on mommy trucks and go and bring goods, tomatoes, onions, strawberries from Burkina. It doesn't matter. And yet, I can bet you they have no clue about African Continental Free Trade area. And yet, they've been trading, and they've been trading for years. And how are we going to ensure that the mechanisms that we're putting in place for the AfCFTA to work is reaching those market women who are daily going across borders to bring goods from other countries and so on? Surely, if the woman in Makola Market is told that, well, in fact, if she can access a platform through her savings and loans institution, or if she banks, or a bank, or using Momo, she can pay for her goods in Nigeria and have them shipped to her, so that she doesn't have to get on the truck and go anymore. She'll be more likely to take advantage of it and so on. Because the fact is that if we do not include the informal sector in a big way in this AfCFTA thing, we'll just be joking. We'll just be joking, and we'll be talking about big corporations and the Dangotes of the world, and we'll be talking about and the big banks and so on. And the ordinary Ghanaian or Nigerian or Kenyan or Ethiopian will be left out of the equation.
Yeah.
And that is where the real money is. That is where the wealth is. It's not with the big corporations, which by the way, most of the time are a lot partly owned by foreign entities and so on. The so-called micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises, those are the drivers of economic development. And if we don't include them in the AfCFTA, we're not getting anywhere. So the education is key. We should take it, I don't know, I view the AfCFTA as a real game changer. And that governments need to think about it in a way which it's almost like you're trying to eradicate measles or something, some communicative disease, where you go to the grassroots. Everybody's educated. If we don't do that and get into the minds of people that this is what we want to do, create a single market for Africa, and so that the farmer who thinks, well, if I plant plantain, I may not be able to sell it but I know I'll be able to sell it in Kenya. I'll be able to sell it in Cameroon. I don't have to be able to sell it only in Ghana. And so I can plant plantain and still make money. And that's what I know what to do, If we don't include them and create mechanisms for them to take advantage of the AfCFTA, we'll be here 10 years later and we'll be talking about the same thing. Because that's where the actual activity is, that's where the wealth is, and that's where we need to help create connections all across the continent.
Basically, to help him, he's just pointed out to us that the Africa Free Trade is like a WhatsApp group. Everybody has been added to the WhatsApp group, but it's like a family WhatsApp group. Like we all have these family WhatsApp chat groups. You've added everybody, but when it's time to determine what we are having for dinner, it's very, very difficult. everybody wants to have something else. Meanwhile, if we all keep our eyes on the ball and we all agree, for example, as you said, most of the people, the whole conversation is about building something people-centered.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is that at the helm, we think the people know. And that's where the education comes in. So if we are at the point where these summits are being held, everybody asks, oh, how is this going to be impactful? Because yesterday something also came out where we were saying it looks like the whole conversation of African free trade has gone down. That was when you pointed out some of the hard work that has been done. Would you say we are at the point where we need to become much more practical than waiting for the next summit? Because we keep having these summits. We are having a conversation right now. That reminds me, my time at ECG, we went for a conference in Morocco. The guy, I didn't have my name tag, so the table I was sitting on was amongst some few other African countries. Then they said, oh, the Ghanaians are about to do a presentation. The guy next to another guy just said, yeah, they have all the bright ideas. They'll give it to us. Next year, they'll come back. They wouldn't have implemented anything. He didn't know I was Ghanaian. I didn't take it personally because from the conversations we have within the whole Africa itself, and I'm going to make you and I talk about practicality and why it is missing. Because it looks like we have the great ideas, we put them on paper, we agree, the bosses agree, we come up, as you said, almost everybody should have institutionalized the Africa free trade, in their countries. What do you think is the main reason why its implementation and its practicality and its technicalness is holding us back?
I think you almost need shepherds. I think every government in Africa should have a ministry for African integration, separate from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We're talking about total integration, talking about commercial, which is really the way integration works anywhere in the world and throughout history. It has been commerce that have joined countries and peoples together, more than anything. And Africa is no different. And I think if we find ways to institutionalize AfCFTA in a way that the ordinary Ghanaian or the ordinary Nigerian or South African knows that it exists, we can go a long way. And there's no better way, I think, than they having a visible institution in their country which is dealing with this, a ministry which is supposed to deal with this sort of African integration. One. Two, we have so many protocols that have been, passed for years and have been ratified by African countries. The most pressing one is the protocol on the free movement of people and goods. I think Rwanda has done a fantastic thing whereby anybody from Africa can go to Rwanda. You don't need a visa. You don't need a visa either. You're from any neighboring country, you can cross the border. If you're flying from West Africa or North Africa or Southern Africa, you can come in and enter Rwanda. Of course, they'll have security checks like everybody else would. But that is a significant thing where other countries you don't have. In other countries, still other countries, you have the problem of the will. Some governments, unfortunately, are simply not willing to implement the protocol of free movement of goods and people for whatever reason. Largely political, I would say. And of course, when you have the new dictatorships, military dictatorships that have come up now in West Africa, for example, it's difficult to implement that because they are always security conscious. But a way in which some impetus has been given to the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is the establishment of an institution known as the African Prosperity Network. It was established by a Ghanaian lawyer and political strategist named Gabi Ochidako. He founded it. And I remember when he first mentioned it to me after going to Davos for a few times. And he says, you know, we need to have a Davos for Africa because we need to think and bring people together and think about the continent beyond the political talk that goes on at the AU. And soon after the AfCFTA was established, and he thought a way to do it would be to create an institution like Davos, which sort of promotes the integration of Africa through the AfCFTA. So African Prosperity Network promotes the African the dialogue, the prosperity dialogues, which is held in Accra, I think every February and March.
Yes, every
Yeah.
February and March.
There have been 3 compacts that have come out of it. There have been government people, ministers, heads of state. You've got business community, big heavyweights like Professor Rama, Afrexim Bank, Dangote, all of them. You've got civil society actors and heads of multilateral development finance institutions, which are also coming. And out of it, they have they've developed compacts, which then are sent to the next AU meeting, where the heads of state get to deliberate on the recommendations that the dialogues have produced. And then when they adopt them, it is now up to each individual country to inculcate it in their public life and in their policy and so on. It has done a whole lot to really advance the cause of the AfCFTA because, as you know, the secretariat of the AfCFTA is in Ghana. So they're a big part of the dialogues and they help to really shape the conversation. So, as I say, 3 compacts have been prepared and they've all been adopted by the UN. 2023 and 2024. Yeah. 2025 will be adopted next AU summit. And in each of those compacts, the business community has things it has to do, the governments have things they have to do, and the development finance institutions have what they have to do. The secretariat itself has what it has to do, and then civil society too has what it has to do. And the idea is that once the governments have adopted it, it will then work to make it happen in their countries. And this is where I'm saying a sort of a ministry or some institution, doesn't have to be a ministry, who's responsible for African integration in every country. That's where they come in. Because once the governments have adopted these policies at the AU, at home, what happens? You know, I think, knowing what I know, I think it has to be a separate, standalone, purposeful institution other than the Ministry of Finance, other than the Ministry of Trade, other than the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It has to be a standalone to really drive the policies in a way that the man on the Clapham bus is also going to be affected. It is very important because so far, that is what we're not saying. And that is why my friend was asking the question about payment systems, because people are just not aware, because we're not driving it to the ground where radio stations and other media are really discussing it as the way for Africa to move together in the 21st century. It is very important.
So basically, in a nutshell, we are not being deliberate. We are not being deliberate about getting this to work. If we're really deliberate about getting it to work, as he said, and I don't believe this is the first time a conversation about an institution, or you mentioned something about us having shepherds to guide the process. Basically, if an institution like that is set up, that means that institution is supposed to guide the whole thing. But in doing that, to make sure that the institution doesn't digress from what its main objectives are, to make sure that the institution is not get dragged into our entire conversation within Africa about poverty alleviation, poverty has no place in the conversation of trade, because we know from the conversations that we are all rich. For example, I don't know from where you started, I'm sure conversations came up about a project like the Inga Dam. I don't know if you've all heard about that Inga River in Congo. If we are all able to put that dam in place, do you know how much electricity is going to generate? Over 100,000 megawatts. That means the whole conversation of electricity for Africa is what? Gone. We are not deliberate enough about talking about ourselves or working together amongst ourselves. Now, Nana, the biggest conversation about this is about you keep mentioning it, and I'll keep coming back to it because, like all of us sitting in here, the average Joe, what would we need to make sure that, okay, if I want to trade in Togo, if I want to trade in Burkina Faso, yeah, okay, Burkina Faso is a touch and go situation because of the military situation out there. So let's say those who have agreed to it and those who are deliberately implementing it, how do we work it out for us to have an understanding where we are all doing this together? Because it's difficult for the average person to actually envisage doing business in Africa than to be doing business with someone in Europe. Let's say if I want to lift goods right now, my first point of call will be going to probably Turkey, China. What do we have to do to let that mindset come through that, look, it's actually even cheaper to go next door to grab the product than to be looking to go international?
I think, once again, we're talking about information sharing, and standardization of products. We now have some African institutions, for example, on food and drugs, for example. You know, we now have a continent-wide institution that will be able to look at the products produced in Africa for standardization and so on. The important thing is that if you should know that if a product is produced in Nigeria, it should be okay for South Africa and okay for Egypt and okay for Morocco and okay for Ghana, because we have the same standards. That makes pushing the products across borders much easier. We don't have that kind of standardization, but we need to adopt a continent-wide standardization, which I think also would be aligned with international standards for maybe Europe or America.
But what about financing? Financing is going to be key.
Yeah, well, financing...
would you say AfriExim is solving the problem of financing?
The point is, you see, AfriExim is financing big things. I'm interested in the small man.
The average, yeah.
Those are still going to be financed largely by domestic sort of sources. You see, I mean, right now, this payment system, for example, you've got 150 banks in Africa who are participating. Okay, you need more to get on board, so that the producer in Ghana who needs to buy a raw product, a raw material in Kenya for what he's producing, can simply spend his CDs and buy it and get his goods on time to do his production. Those arrangements, as time goes on, will keep expanding. They'll keep expanding, and they will make the right impact. Another thing that I think is important that we promote in Africa towards, again, African integration is a simple thing like tourism. I mean, I think Africans, when they think of going on holiday, they're thinking about some exotic place like Greece or, London, France. The metropolitan sort of areas from the colonial parts, But nobody thinks of going. I see that more and more people are doing that.
Yeah.
I see that on social media. They're going to Zanzibar and going to Seychelles and going
Look,
to.
I was amazed to find out that there's a running track and a walking track within Kigali. They've built a walking track that, okay, if you decide that you want to walk to work, there are chaperones there to make sure that you don't walk on the walking track with the wrong shoes. So you have to wear sneakers. So the guy is waiting for you to actually change your work shoes into your sneakers and then use the walking track to walk all around. And they don't have much, but the kind of tourism that they are building is something that is interesting for you to come and see. I'm building on his point where tourism within Africa is big. The only catch is if you and I want to go to Mali today, from your experience, how do we get to Mali from Ghana?
Oh, you see, that's the problem of the air transportation, because, well, it's easier, than we don't have railways.
No.
So that's going to take some time.
We have to fly to Europe before we fly back to Mali.
Look, the fact is that in the last 10 years, it has improved.
Yeah.
Airlines like ASKY and Peace and African World and so on are creating pathways to, perhaps not enough.
Yeah.
You see, and it is still more expensive to travel within Africa than to go out of Africa. But these are all the conversations we should be having, so that if there's the AU has a convention that every country has ratified, then we can have uniform charges across board in Africa for landing fees, for this and that, and so on, to make it to idea about making it cheaper. The point I'm making is that we have to be deliberate, intentional about these things. They don't just happen. And governments have a role to play. I think largely on trade and commerce, it is the private sector which is leading, and it is doing so now. The private sector is doing so now, but governments have to create the enablers that will allow that will allow these to happen. People, when I talk about tourism, I'm not talking even about people having to fly. You can take a bus from Accra to Abidjan, to San Pedro, to Grand-Bassam, to Yamoussoukro in Abidjan. You can take a bus to Sierra Leone, to Liberia, or to Senegal in West Africa. People-to-people exchanges are critical if we're going to move this African integration project forward. Yeah. People have to appreciate what we have in Africa, because it's the people-to-people. How many people go on holiday and then come back with a business idea? So many, all the time. All the time. You say you're going on holiday, going to relax, and then you go to a country and something there just piques your interest, and all of a sudden you think, this could be interesting. You make friends in those countries, you feel comfortable, and then next thing you're doing business with people there. So getting people to move a lot around freely. That is why the protocol on the free movement of goods and people is critical. We can't have an Africa, a borderless Africa.
We can all see he's getting passionate, but I have to take questions from the audience to add to what, so that we can actually spice it up and know what you are also thinking. So, if there are any questions, okay.
All right. Rajesh.
It's all about how do you get all of the telcos to come to the table, because banks are one thing, but let's say if we're looking at Kenya, for example, the M-Pesa phenomenon. In Ghana, you've got MTN Momo, which is a quasi-monopoly in reality, even though you've got the interoperable payment system. and then somewhere like Zimbabwe where you've got EcoNet. How do you bring all of those to the table? Because I think that's still part of the challenge for PAPs to be successful. And I think one of the solutions, and I'm just throwing this out there, I think Africa needs to look at is blockchain and using stable coins as a way of settlement, because then you're almost going towards your point of decentralization and giving autonomy to those SMEs and MSMEs as well. So what are your thoughts about the telcos? Because they're probably more vital than the banks themselves.
Right. All right. First of all, I don't know what the situation is in every single country, but in Ghana, most of these telcos are riding on the backs of the national fiber optic system. It's a national security matter. And so if we are truly desirous of making the telcos, bringing them to the table to expand the operations in that area, making it accessible to most people, it's simple as to pass legislation. And I believe even in countries where they might not necessarily be relying on the national grid to do it, you can do it through legislation. Particularly if the African Union has passed a convention of sorts, which enjoin the individual member countries to do this. So, and that is why it's important that the work that the African Prosperity Network is doing with the dialogues, because they send the compacts to AU Summit for them to take action on it. And then the individual countries can also put the legislation in place to make it happen. The fact is that you're absolutely right. If we're going to do this, we have to take advantage of every opportunity out there. And right now we know most people, I mean, Ghana, I think we have more mobile penetration than we do population.
Yeah.
We have like 98 million or something, 30 million people, which means that people have several phones and people are simply sitting on social media every day. and what they do, their business on social media, they use Momo and all these things.
Momo is the biggest thing being used in Ghana right now.
So again, you wouldn't, I for now wouldn't advocate blockchains and so on, because I think people are familiar with things like wallets and Momos and what have you, and you want to capitalize and build on it for those to really be drivers of whatever it is, in this case, commerce. But yeah, I think you see, the truth is, not every African country, or no, let me put it this way, not every African government is interested in this project. Not every, you see, but then beyond the continent-wide.
Before you carry on, why?
Beyond the continent-wide solutions, there's room for regional and country-specific decentralization. There is, because, for example, I think yesterday somebody talked about a single currency development and the ECHO. The ECHO did not fail because France didn't want its former colonial subjects to participate. It failed because some countries simply couldn't meet the convergence criteria. And they probably will never meet the convergence criteria. And that is why we started the conversation about PAPs in the first place. Because we realized that if we're going to sit around waiting for a single currency, the convergence criteria is going to make it impossible until some genius came up with another way to do it. We would have to rely on other means. And that's why the PAPs, and that's I mean, a very nice solution. But I think eventually the whole of Africa would have to go to a single currency, and I believe we can get there. But for now, ECOWAS can take steps. We have a single customs union. If you ship goods to Mali and it comes to Tema Port, you don't pay any taxes in Tema Port. You pay when it gets to Mali. And then whatever Tema Port share is, they reconcile. There are ways in which the systems are working. And I think it can be applied continent-wide when it's necessary. But the regional economic communities are also very, very helpful to get things done. Yeah.
Next question. Yeah.
The last one.
Oh, really? There are a few more. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
Yes, my name is Dr. Kirsty Kwarteng. I am a research associate at SOAS University of London. My area of focus is in migration. I'm also working with the African Foundation for Development and APPG for Ghana on a diaspora a trade and investment mission. And Ambassador, as someone that focuses on migration, I was very happy to hear you talking about the relationship between the free movement of people and its impact on trade. And I, like you, am a bit perplexed as to why countries are so willing to embrace trade but not necessarily willing to embrace migration when the two they go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
So what practically can be done to encourage countries, encourage people to really understand the necessity of migration as it relates to trade? Thank you.
In a nutshell, I would say peer pressure. No, I mean, look, I mean, you need the AU, first of all, to take it seriously. I believe there is a champion. I believe one of the heads of state is the AU champion for migration. I think it's the same, the former president, Isifu, who was the champion for AfCFTA. I believe he's the champion for migration as well. You have to get them in the room, and you have to shame them to do the right thing. And I do know that if this is put on the agenda, and somebody like Paul Kagame is in the room, he gets to cajole his colleagues, because you cannot have a single market if you don't have free movement of goods and people. It is absolutely impossible. And the notion that you somehow, AfCFTA is going on and it's expanding and it's great, and you close all your borders to your fellow Africans is the wrong move. I think connected to that too is a conscious effort to fight xenophobia. Because in 1990, thereabouts, 1990, when I was a young lawyer in New York, I was the secretary of the board of an organization called the South African Free Elections Fund. And we raised a lot of money, tens of millions of dollars, mainly from black entrepreneurs, but also from big American names like Coca-Cola, Heinz, and so on, to fund voter education in South Africa, moving towards democracy. And Nelson Mandela came to our law firm, and all of that. And a lot of people, friends of mine, African Americans, moved from America and went to live in South Africa to help them, and stayed. Same thing with Nigerians. Loads of Nigerians moved to South Africa to help them to get through the democratic transition. But then, when things got tough in South Africa, suddenly Nigerians were being blamed. Suddenly Kenyans were being blamed. They were being banned. They were being beaten, and so on and so forth. Those are not very helpful things. And I think that if governments would tell the people the truth, the people would realize that those people are not their enemies, and they are not the reason why maybe they're poor or not. But it's a big thing. If you don't get rid of xenophobia, and it has to be, again, a concerted, conscious effort to do that, both in literature, in the publications, in the media, to get all Africans thinking alike. We all think alike when it comes to things like slavery. Somehow we don't have any difficulty with that. Africans think alike, we can all fight the same thing. But when it comes to simple things like xenophobia and so on, somehow we forget. The tribalism sets in, and the ethnocentrism sets in, and we do foolish things. And I think, again, it's about education. But because governments, some governments in Africa thrive on that kind of division and promoting that kind of dissension, it is why we are where we are today.
Last question, then we can...
Thank you very much. Mine's a contribution. I'm Diane Friado, Head of Trade and Investment at the Ghana High Commission. What I would like to add 2 or 3 quick things. One, be intentional. I can see a lot of young ones here. And now, if I'm to ask, how many of you plan getting to the end of, let's say, holidays, plan going to any of the African countries? So if we, all of us, decide to plan doing such things, we will help boost our sector when it comes to tourism. And I also have young people, when you go for meetings, when they meet you, why do you, a Nigerian holding a Ghanaian passport, why this, why that? So then I asked somebody, are you a British? She said no. So why do you have British passport? He said, I was born here. And so I have lots of Nigerians who were also born in Ghana. We have lots of Lebanese who were born in Ghana, and those who have also stayed there. So we really need to trade among ourselves. If it's going to be possible, then we also have to embrace ourselves as well. I'm not saying come to Ghana or go to any African countries and do illegal things, but how do we embrace ourselves in trading in everything to help us? And another thing I wanted to add is the blockchain. Currently, it started some time ago. We couldn't finalize it. We are almost done with the policy and the regulation for the blockchains and the trading and everything. And we are hoping, if not this year, by the end of middle of early next year, it will be passed. And when the law is passed, then it means it's legal. It's legal to do things. And we really need to put modalities in place so that the negative aspect of it will be able to contain it. And that's what the government is doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go back to...
I'll just let Nana wrap up with just 3 sentences. Closing remarks.
Nana in 3 sentences.
Yes.
I've enjoyed being here. Thank you very much.
Well,
let's give it up. Let's give it up.
He says thank you very much. But I want to leave us with my parting words is going to be this. All of us here, including myself, have a responsibility. We are getting to the point where we can't just sit down and hope that those at the top are the ones doing the talk for us. We will attend these kind of functions. They will put it together for us nicely. We network. We get back home. We are done. We need to stop that. We need to find a way to work together to promote these things that have already been done. As he said, he's unemployed. You will find him wherever you want to find him. Whatever is in his head that you need to drag it out because you'll be so eager to help. Myself, I'm available. The conversation needs to change. If we need to leverage on these things to move forward, don't sit down here, look to your left, look to your right, and think that someone next to you is not capable. It's not true. None of us knew where we would be today, a week ago, last month, last year. But how far we've come, and for the mere fact that we are in this room together, it means that there's something that we are destined to do together or do on our own. Please, let's all help Africa. That's all we have. Thank you and have a great day.
You can do better. You can do better. That was a wonderful panel. Thank you so much. Samuel Dubik Mahama. Thank you.